Okay, so you're leading a team and everyone seems super confident about the project, but you have this feeling like deep down something's off. Have you ever been there?
Oh yeah, all the time.
That's your metacognition. It's like this inner sense of knowing if you're right or not. And today we're going deep on how researchers actually measure this.
It's a slippery concept.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's more than just a gut feeling.
For sure. It's way more than just confidence. It's like you're accurately judging your own understanding.
So you really know when you're right or wrong. And so that's where this paper comes in.
Right. So we're going to be looking at a 2025 study by Dobromir Ranev. It was published in Nature Communications. And he analyzed 17 different methods that researchers use to measure metacognition.
So 17? That's a lot. So he's trying to find like the best tools to measure this, knowing. And that's especially relevant to our listeners who are making decisions about people and projects all the time.
It's like you said, hiring decisions, performance reviews, evaluating your own progress on goals.
Even just knowing if we're on the right track. Okay, so let's break this down a bit more. What is metacognition?
So think about this. You could ace a test and still feel unsure about your answers or bomb a presentation, but think you nailed it. That's metacognition at play, that gap between your actual knowledge and what you think you know.
So it's not just about being smart.
Right.
It's about being smart about how smart you are.
You got it. And this paper is trying to measure that self-awareness.
Okay.
It's like trying to measure how well someone can predict the weather using all sorts of different tools. Some might be more accurate than others. Some might be better for different situations.
So you're saying Ranev's paper is comparing all these different
metacognition thermometers.
I like that analogy. What kind of thermometers are we talking about?
Well, he looked at all sorts of different measures, grouped them into 3 main categories: traditional, normalized, and model-based.
Let's start with traditional.
Yeah.
Those are like the old school ways.
Yeah, exactly. The ones that have been around for a while, just asking someone, how confident are you in your answer? Or calculating the difference in confidence between correct and incorrect answers. But these traditional measures can be thrown off by how easy or hard the task is.
So someone could look like they have great metacognition just because they're getting all the easy questions. That doesn't seem very accurate.
That's where the normalized measures come in.
Okay.
They try to level the playing field and account for how well someone actually performs on the task. Some use ratios or differences to adjust for biases.
So it's not just about how confident you are. It's about how that confidence matches up with how you actually do.
And then the model-based measures are the new kids on the block. They use specific theories about how metacognition works in the brain. So things like meta-noise and meta-uncertainty.
Interesting. So they're trying to measure the uncertainty even when we think we know the answer.
Even when we know the right answer, sometimes there's still that
little bit of doubt. So we've got traditional, straightforward, but sometimes biased, normalized, tries to adjust for those biases, and model-based gets into the nitty-gritty of how it works. But before we go any further, how did he know if these measures were any good? Like, how do we know if they're actually measuring metacognition?
So Ranev was really smart about this. He wanted to prove these measures were actually tapping into metacognition, not just some random confidence fluctuations. So imagine you're taking a test, and after each question, you rate how confident you are in your answer, and then someone comes along and messes with those ratings, makes them less accurate on purpose.
Ooh, that's sneaky.
But it's brilliant, because if the measure's any good, it should be sensitive to that manipulation.
So if someone's confidence is messed with, the metacognition measure should go down.
Exactly. It's like a stress test for the measure.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Stress test.
Yeah.
So how do these different measures do on the stress test?
Well, it turns out they all seem to be measuring some aspect of metacognition, but some were more precise than others.
So like some thermometers are just more finely tuned.
Exactly.
Are there any that were like way off?
One stood out called meta-uncertainty.
And it was less precise.
Yeah, it was almost like it was picking up on something slightly different.
So maybe metacognition is more complex than we thought.
Maybe it's not just one thing.
Right.
It's a collection of different processes.
It's like intelligence.
Yeah.
We don't just have one intelligence score.
Right. It's a combination of different skills. And that's what makes this research so cool. It makes us really think about what metacognition is.
Okay, so we talked about the stress test. I'm guessing there's more to it than just messing with people's ratings.
You're right. There are other things that can mess with our measurements.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What else is out there that could skew these results?
We call them nuisance variables.
Nuisance variables.
Yeah, they're like gremlins in the data.
Okay, I'm ready to hunt some gremlins.
Let's do it. So one of the biggest gremlins is something called metacognitive bias. It's the tendency to be overconfident even when you're wrong.
Ah, so some people think they know everything.
Exactly.
Even when they don't.
And then others are always second-guessing themselves.
Yeah, so that could really mess with the measurements, right?
It definitely can. Someone who's really overconfident might score high on a test, even if they're not actually good at judging their own knowledge.
So do we just throw the whole test out then?
Not necessarily. Some measures are less affected by this bias than others. For example, measures that use ratios to compare confidence with accuracy tend to be more robust. They can kind of see past that overconfidence or underconfidence.
So those measures are more bias-proof.
Yeah, you could say that. Now, another gremlin is response bias. It's a little technical, but it's the tendency to favor one answer even when you're not sure.
So like if someone always picks C on a multiple choice test, even if they have no idea.
Yeah, you'd think that would really mess things up, but it doesn't seem to have a huge impact, at least not in the studies Ron have looked at.
Okay, so we've got task difficulty, metacognitive bias, response bias, what else?
Reliability.
Reliability.
You gotta have reliable measures.
Right, because if you get on a scale and it gives you a different weight every time.
You're gonna be like, what is going on?
Is this thing broken?
Yeah, exactly.
Or am I somehow gaining and losing 5 pounds?
Right.
Every time I step on it.
We want our measures to give us consistent results. Ron have looked at 2 types of reliability. First one is split half reliability.
Split half.
Yeah, you split the test in half, compare the scores.
So it's like, are the 2 halves balanced?
Exactly. And most of the measures did pretty well on this one, as long as you have enough data. But if you only have a small sample size, it might not be as reliable.
So more data is better.
More data is always better. Okay. The second type is test-retest reliability.
Test-retest.
Yeah, so you give someone the test one day.
Then you give it to them again a week later. See if they get similar scores. And the results here weren't so good.
Really?
Yeah, even with large sample sizes, the consistency wasn't great.
So you're saying someone's metacognitive ability can change from day to day?
It seems like it. It raises all sorts of questions about metacognition.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like a muscle. You can strengthen it or weaken it.
Depending on like stress.
Yeah, stress, fatigue.
Even the environment you're in. So what does this all mean for our listeners? Should they even bother using these measures?
If the results might not be stable, it's a valid concern. I wouldn't say we should give up on them completely, though.
Okay.
It's a new field of research. We're still figuring things out.
So it's like we're exploring this new territory.
Exactly. We're still matching it out.
But I do think there's value in incorporating these assessments. It's just a matter of being aware of their limitations.
Right.
Don't treat any single measurement as the absolute truth. It's more like a snapshot of someone's metacognitive abilities.
At a particular moment.
Right.
So instead of thinking of it as a fixed score, it's more like a dynamic skill that can change over time.
And be influenced by all these different factors.
This is really making me think.
And it leads to a really important question. If metacognition can change, can we actually improve it?
Can we train our brains to be better at this?
That's the million-dollar question. How do we train our brains to be better at knowing about knowing?
Is it like brain exercises or something?
It's actually simpler than you might think. One of the best things you can do is reflect. Take time to analyze your own thought processes.
So after a big project or a decision, just really break it down.
Exactly.
Okay.
Think about what assumptions you made, what information you focused on, how you weighed the risks.
So it's like being a detective of your own mind.
And as you start to uncover those patterns, you'll start to see your own biases.
Like, oh, I always underestimate how long things will take.
Yeah. Or I get overconfident when I'm working with familiar material.
Yeah, exactly.
And once you're aware of those tendencies, you can start to adjust. Another thing that's really helpful is feedback. Sometimes we need an outside perspective to see our blind spots.
Yeah, it's hard to see those in ourselves.
So ask your colleagues or mentors for their honest opinion.
And that doesn't have to be negative.
No, it can also be positive.
Like to see what we're good at. So it's a two-way street. What else can we do?
When you're learning something new,
pay
attention to how you're learning.
So what strategies work best?
Yeah, what kind of environment do you thrive in?
What kind of feedback helps you learn? So it's like becoming a student of your own learning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And by constantly evaluating and adjusting, you can become a much better learner.
So I've got reflection, feedback, and being mindful of our learning process. Anything else?
Step outside your comfort zone. Challenge your assumptions. Try new things.
And don't be afraid to fail.
Failing is a great way to learn. Every time you make a mistake, it's an opportunity to grow. Analyze what happened, adjust your approach, and try again.
So it's all about learning from those experiences.
One last tip. Pay attention to your emotions. Our feelings can really influence our thinking, and sometimes those emotions can lead us down the wrong path. It's like they say, never make a decision when you're angry.
Exactly. So before you make a big decision, check in with yourself. How are you feeling? Calm, focused, objective, or anxious, or overly excited?
Because if you're not in the right headspace, maybe it's better to wait.
Wait until you've calmed down.
Wow, this has been so insightful.
I agree. It's amazing how much power we have over our own thinking.
And these insights are useful for everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
So whether you're leading a team, managing a project, or just trying to learn something new.
Metacognition can help you make better decisions and just navigate life with more awareness.
I feel so meta-powered up right now.
Me too. It's like we've unlocked a secret superpower.
So to our listeners out there, thanks for joining us.
Keep those minds thinking about thinking.